Well, a fairly nice morning around the southern part of the state this morning. We've got a giant anticyclone off to our east, centered right over New York State and Pennsylvania, and the flow around this region of high pressure is clockwise, and so the flow in our region is going to be somewhat brisk at times today um, from the south-southwest, and so that almost always means a pretty nice warm day, and it certainly does by the end of February. Speaking of February, we're 2 days away from the end of the month, and we're at 12.6 degrees below normal in Madison for the month of February. So we're going to finish out as one of the coldest months in recent memory. And it's also interesting, I noted today that the highest temperature for the month was 46 degrees Fahrenheit on Tuesday when we had a beautiful day, and the lowest was minus 18. So we had a range of 64 degrees Fahrenheit from the highest to the lowest temperature of the month. Certainly, that will never be the kind of range that you get in May, June, July, and August. Those ranges are considerably smaller than that. In the wintertime, I'm not sure which month has the largest range. If I had to guess, I'd say January for an individual month in range of temperature. And I don't know which calendar day has the greatest range in our all long recorded history of weather here in Madison of about 150 years with historical values. That would be an interesting thing to find out. But 64 degrees for this month is pretty darn good. We were really cold for most of it. We had one warm day on Tuesday, and everything else has been only slightly above the average at this last week of the month. We're going to end up at least 10 degrees colder than normal by the time it's all over. So the active weather across the country is really concentrated down over the lower Mississippi Valley and then stretching eastward into the western Carolinas. There's precipitation all the way from Texarkana, Texas, all the way out to the hill country of South Carolina. Some of it's kind of intense, as you can see in the reflectivity at an instant on this map. We'll see it in the radar summary a little bit later. And so some of these places will get some pretty decent thunder showers, maybe even some hailstones, some mixed freezing precipitation in the southern Ozarks, south of Missouri. So that's south of St. Louis. So there's going to be some mix of weather as far south as places in the southern part of Missouri. Over the Pacific Northwest, as we'll see in the radar in a minute, there's widely scattered precipitation falling, and there's most of it's snow, even in the Seattle area, light snow showers, and then certainly over the Bitterroot Mountains of Idaho, and then the Rockies in Montana. So widespread but light snows in many of those locations, a little bit around Salt Lake City as well. Other than that, the country's enjoying a pretty nice day, especially so over the Northeast, which, being dominated as it is by high pressure, there's very little wind, pretty clear skies, and the temperatures will rise simply by the fact that the sun angle in late February is so much higher now than it was 6 or 8 weeks ago. In fact, we're less than a month from the equinox, which means that the sun angle is equivalent right now to what it was about October 20th in the fall. So we're climbing in the sky, and you probably noticed the days get longer. We almost have to wait till 6 o'clock on sunny days before the horizon is dark now, which is great. Okay, temperatures around the country this morning reflect this moderation that's going on around the United States. It's only in the high 20s and sometimes low 20s on the coast of Maine and New England. That's not so bad for late February. Very warm down in the southeast. Everywhere south, in fact, of where it's precipitating, as we'll see in a minute, is very warm and probably very moist. And we'll begin talking about humidity in the atmosphere quite soon in our series of lectures. So we're going to start to bring in another map every day regarding that. But notice the temperature contrast is pretty strong across the state, let's say, of Mississippi. It's 57 down at Jackson, and it's 42 here in far southeastern Tennessee, just over the border into Tennessee. That's a pretty decent temperature contrast, and that's mimicked all the way along the boundary from where it's yellow to blue rather rapidly. It's in the low 20s this morning here, frost on the windshield, but it'll be in the low 40s by the end of the day. Pretty nice day. More snow will be melting and sublimating away as we continue through this relatively mild week. And it's mild almost everywhere in the western half of the United States. Don't get fooled by these pinks where it's colder. That's high elevation. Of course it'll be colder there, as we talked about the other day. But at lower elevations, temperatures are really quite nice. Even at International Falls, it was 32 degrees this morning, which is just unbelievable. And this is at 7:30 a.m. local time. So not too bad. Here's the satellite movie across the continental United States and adjacent waters this morning. Even though there's a fairly well-organized cloud mass across Minnesota, the Dakotas, and parts of western Nebraska early on, and then moving into kind of getting itself centered in Ontario, that's not apparently associated with very much precipitation. So it's sort of a high cloud feature mostly right now. This cloud feature across the northern tier of the southern states is the one that is, and you can even see little convective-looking elements developing on the southern side of it. this is the place where there's some location of thunderstorms and whatnot going on associated with that event. And then out in the Pacific Northwest, you'll see clouds seemingly streaming along the British Columbia coast and then turning into the continent at about the Columbia River. And that's a developing upper level disturbance that's spreading those light snow showers over the Pacific Northwest and as far west or as far east as western Montana. And in a minute, we'll look at this nice looking cyclone out here at the mouth of the Labrador Sea. And you can get a hint of what I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to show you the Canadian view of this, which is a little bit further to the east. And they color in the infrared satellite image. So there'll be higher clouds, colder cloud tops in this band of clouds, and then slightly warmer, lower cloud tops back on this side. It's kind of a nice evolution I want to show you. And one gets the impression, too, I'll say one last thing about this precipitation down over the southern states. One gets the impression that there is a stream of flow out of the tropics that seems somehow connected to this. Just by watching the cloud elements off the coast of Mexico and in Central America, and watching the same direction of the flow across the southern states. So there is some connection there, as it turns out. So let's continue by looking at our radar summary across the continental U.S. And I'll start it now. Let's see, I got to go to the start button. Yeah. So here's the animation over the last 6 or 7 hours. And you can see here's the heavy convective precipitation. Everywhere where it's orange and red, you're likely hearing thunder and seeing lightning and probably getting some hailstones or something, or big raindrops, freshly melted hailstones perhaps. But remember, this is occurring in a location where there's a substantial temperature contrast across a short distance. Later on, we'll call that a temperature gradient. And it's very warm in southern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, and quite a bit cooler in Tennessee and North Carolina. And right in that boundary is where this significant precipitation is occurring. And we will talk about why that's the case quite a bit later in our series of lectures, but this is the first example that we've seen so vividly illustrated in the last few weeks of precipitation along a frontal boundary. And then here's the precipitation in the Pacific Northwest. Notice how it's quite scattered over Washington State, northern Oregon, and parts of northern Idaho. And so but most of that is snow, because it's sort of showery snow. You'll be snowing heavily, probably giant snowflakes, almost at the freezing point, and then it'll stop for a while, and then the next snow shower will come in, and it's kind of an exciting day when you're down in a place where that's happening. Okay, let me show you now the Canadian satellite movie of that storm that's off the coast of Newfoundland and south of Greenland. So it's this storm right here. And so the Canadian Meteorological Center takes a satellite movie from a European satellite, and the infrared imagery is then color-coded. So the oranges and yellows represent really cold cloud tops. They're radiating at very low amounts of infrared radiation. And then the whiter ones are quite a bit warmer. And so you can see that the separation in cloud height associated with this storm. And it would be true of almost any storm. This one happens to present itself nicely for us today. So here's the long cloud streak that comes out of the tropics. This is 30 degrees north. Comes out of the subtropics all the way to the tip of Greenland. And that's the main cloud deck associated with the storm. And then the center of the circulation is right around here. And you can even see that those cloud elements in white are rotating somewhat counterclockwise around that center of circulation. And these clouds, though they're not as deep, they very often are associated with some of the heaviest precipitation in these extratropical or mid-latitude cyclones. And we'll talk a little bit about that by the time we get to late March and April. So that's a really nice picture of a sort of a typical, not unduly intense extratropical cyclone, but one that illustrates the difference in cloud elevation that can be associated with such storms. I thought it was worth showing. And then let's go to the Pacific coast and take a look quickly at the satellite image movie out over the Pacific. It's really quite not so well organized. There's not too much organized weather at about the date line. So here's the far western part of the Aleutian chain, and there's a northward flow of clouds and moisture elements headed toward the Bering Sea, but they're not really tied to any obvious cyclone. The same is true along the west coast itself. There's no organized weather system sitting there. You can see this flow of these little cloud elements that develop off the coast of British Columbia, especially right at that time. That's significant in the sense that there's a developing upper-level disturbance that is in charge of producing those clouds. And that disturbance itself takes shape over this period of the animation. So that's pretty nice. You don't often get to see such things in the satellite movie. That's a little bit more of a higher level subject that we would talk about in a class that you might take with me 2 or 3 years from now. But we certainly would see elements like this, and we'd certainly want to talk about them then. And then finally, since it's Friday, let's take a look at our forecast for the week. And we always use 850 millibars, 1 mile or so above sea level, as our proxy for how the temperatures might change during the coming week. And so we'll do that now. Here in Madison, this is a forecast made last night. Oh, and it always does this to me. This is a forecast made last night, and I'm showing you this morning's forecast, valid at 7 a.m., and we are about -6 or so at 850 millibars. So that translates to about 0 near the ground, and we're going to be around freezing in the mid-morning. And so a pretty decent connection there. Notice there's really, really cold air well up into northern Canada. It looks as cold as it did in the first part of this month, but the question is, where will this cold air go? And we have to watch that as we move forward. So unfortunately, we're going to have to go quickly. This is now valid tonight. That cold air pools to our north seems to expand a little bit. This is now Saturday morning, and one can see it making slow progress southward into northern Ontario, past to the south of Lake Winnipeg in Manitoba, and just about to enter the United States. 12 hours later, by Saturday night, it seems to have gotten stuck in northern Canada as the weather system develops over southeastern South Dakota, and that changes the direction of the flow, actually. So we now have, by Saturday afternoon, we'll have flow coming from the south, and we'll be considerably warmer on Saturday afternoon than we are today. And so we might end up with temperatures in the mid-40s on Saturday, a pretty nice day. And then we'll keep on going to Sunday morning, when that storm goes right across the central part of our state on its western side, since these storms have counterclockwise rotation. On its western side, there's more of an encouragement to drag that cold air southward. Let's see if that continues. And this is now Monday, and one can see there goes the storm over to southeast Ontario, and certainly colder air seems poised to make its way, and in fact has already begun to do so in the northern part of our state. Colder air making its way into Wisconsin by Sunday night. And by Monday morning, first day of March, and the old thing about March is sometimes it comes in like a lion and leaves like a lamb. It looks like it'll come in like a lion this year, because at least here anyway, early morning on Monday the 1st, we're going to have very strong cold air advection over the state of Wisconsin, and one little lobe of that exceptionally cold air is poised to make its way into our state. And then by Monday afternoon, things change abruptly. The cold air slides right past us into northern Ohio and Indiana,